Let's talk about TheRow. TheRow had a sample sale recently. They do have these sample sales. They've had them in the past, but this year especially, there seemed to be a lot of noise and also a lot of media coverage around TheRow sample sale. It makes a lot of sense. TheRow has been growing as a brand both financially and in the ether and in the realm of fashion and just culture in general. So more and more people have been more interested in buying the brand. And I think with the whole quiet luxury trend that destroyed all of our brains, I think a lot of people that maybe wouldn't know about TheRow or wouldn't have any exposure to it learnt about TheRow because TheRow was one of those brands that was mentioned quite regularly, to be honest, when we were talking about brands that are kind of embedded into this idea of what quiet luxury is, even though I hate that phrase because what does it really mean? But people are talking about brands like Loro Piana, they were talking about TheRow. So right now I feel like TheRow has gone from a super niche brand to a niche mass brand-ish. I wouldn't say it's mass market yet. If I was to ask a lot of my family members if you know what TheRow is, they definitely wouldn't know what TheRow is, but I definitely think it's starting to become more mainstream. So what we're going to do, we're going to react to a video via Cassie Thorpe. I'm not sure how many of you follow her, but if you don't, definitely follow her, subscribe to her channel on YouTube. But she had all the points that I wanted to make. So I was like, I might as well just react to her video. It's easier. And then I can add the points I wanted to add as we go. So yeah.
Is TheRow about to lose what makes them so special? TheRow, when it comes to luxury fashion, this is minimalism's final boss. This is, if you know luxury. It's timeless, high quality pieces. It's a...
So while I agree with her, sorry for pausing so quickly. While I agree with Cassie, is TheRow, can we call TheRow if you know type of thing anymore? Can we put TheRow in the category of if you know, considering how mainstream it's gone? I'll let you guys talk about that in the comments.
$3,000 sweater that in the right circles will give you a little nod of approval. It is this sort of very well calculated entity. And over the last few years, TheRow has really shot up in terms of how much we talk about it, in terms of how popular the brand is. And they've done this through a number of different things. Okay, the stars have aligned in such a way that we are running our mouths about TheRow. This was very much a brand that was really quite under the radar, and now it really can't be described as that at all. However, I was inspired to do this video.
Okay, so she made the point. She said, yeah, we can't really describe it as niche anymore. So yeah, she made the point.
Based on two things in particular. Number one, the absolute ginormous amount of TheRow sample sale content that came out whenever that sample sale was, what, like a week ago or something like this. And also Neelam Ahuja's open letter to TheRow entitled Open Letter to TheRow.
Yeah, Neelam's open letter. I can't remember how much she touches on it, but if she doesn't completely touch on it, I'll add some context. But the funny thing about sample sales that I just wanted to add on is that most times brands put garments in their sample sales that they are struggling to sell. So normally, if you're going to a sample sale, obviously if you have like an eclectic taste, then it's good. But if you like the more mainstream pieces that TheRow makes, 9 times out of 10, you're not really going to find those in sample sales, which is why I always question, like, people that go to TheRow sample sales and drop 20K, I question if they actually like TheRow or if they just wanted the brand. They wanted to wear the brand. And so they're like, now I can kind of get loads more pieces for cheaper. Let me just buy all of them. Because it's like, for the most part, they're going to be selling clothing that's less desirable, which is why it's not selling, which is why it ends up in a sample sale. A sample sale is a good way for a luxury brand to not lose that air of exclusivity, especially when, you know, their stuff isn't going on clearance. So instead of putting your stuff on sale, you just put it in the sample sale instead. That's like a really smart way of doing it. But I do think you have to question how much these people actually truly like these brands when they're dropping insane amounts of money. Like on TikTok, I've seen people that have dropped 25K on the sample sale. Like people have dropped outrageous amounts of money.
We've got to break up. Let's discuss. We've got a lot to get through. Guys, if you're new here, my name is Cassie and I'm a self-diagnosed luxury addict. I put out videos on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, so if you like luxury fashion, oh, then you're probably going to love it here. So head on there, subscribe, turn on the bell, become a member of our luxury addicted family. When are we going to rehab? Never. A couple of weeks ago, TheRow held a sample sale. Well, caveat, it's not technically TheRow holding the sample sale. It was managed by a third party called Privé, I believe. And when it comes to sample sales, New York loves a good sample sale.
Just to pause. So someone is asking, how common are sample sales these days? I feel like they're really big in the aughts, but I rarely hear about them. So I think it depends where you live. Now, I don't live in New York, so the New Yorkers have to tell me how many sample sales there are. However, as someone that lives in London, we have loads of sample sales. There's actually an Instagram page, I've forgotten what it's called, but that Instagram page literally updates you on all the different sample sales happening in London. And it feels like there's a sample sale almost every week. So in London, at least, there are loads of sample sales, but I don't really know about, I can't speak to other cities because I live in London. So yeah, but in London, loads.
It is not uncommon for people to camp out overnight, and this was no different. There is a line standing company called, I think, the Old Line Standing Guy, something like that. I'll have the name of it on the screen. So out of the 85 first people in the TheRow sample sale queue, 60 of those came from this line standing company. So essentially people pay to have people stand in line for them. I believe the rate is $25 an hour or something about that.
Isn't it so insane that TheRow is so hyped? People are treating it like Supreme at the height of Supreme. Like when I was younger, for people that don't know, I used to resell Supreme and it used to be like this. Like people would pay people to line up for them. People would queue the day before because you knew that there was so much money to be made. This is literally like, this is so dystopian. This is the modern version of a Supreme drop, just more expensive. You just need more capital to make money because, I mean, TheRow, even on clearance, is still super expensive. So this is crazy.
The most somebody was paid was $800 to stand in line and ensure that you have got prime line standing priority such that you get in there and you get the pieces that you want, okay? It sounds ridiculous, but this is very much a thing. The TheRow sample sale is definitely an event. You know, I've heard mutterings about it and everything else, but definitely not to the extent that it was this year, or at least how it was shown to be on social media. Just for context, the line guys had booked out all of their line standers because of the TheRow sample sale. This is a hot ticket to get. They had a VIP day, which was a sort of day before the rest of the invites. I think this was sort of...
Actually, guys, I take it back. As hyped as Supreme was, I've never personally, in London, because obviously Supreme in New York might be a different vibe, I've never seen a Supreme drop in London with a line that long. That's an outrageously long line. That's insane.
ICs and celebrities that were kind of invited to that. Very hush-hush. The rest of the days followed with normal people who managed to get an invite through whatever tips and tricks and getting on their essays, good sides and whatnot. Why? To have the privilege of buying TheRow pieces at, I think it was about 75% off. What kind of numbers are we talking here? Let me tell you. So, you know they had those Dune flip-flops, the ones that went viral this year and shockingly sold out in the black and red. Well, the all-black version made it into the sample sale because apparently that is too nondescript for it to sell. So those were $650. They were being sold at $162. Bags were like being sold around the $800 mark. Coats were going from like $3,000 something to just over $1,000. There was one coat that was $13,000.
So do you know the thing about sample sales and things going on sale? I learned this a long time ago when I was younger, right? About sample sales or discounts or whatever. Just buy what you like, whether it's more expensive or less expensive. If you want something that's more expensive, just save up for it. Because with these sample sales, you think to yourself, it's like a mental thing. You're like, oh, it's reduced from 3K to 1K. It's a bargain, let me buy it. But then you realize you don't actually wear it because you didn't actually want that. You didn't need that piece. So you didn't really have a use for it. There was no use case for it. You just bought it because it's on sale, it's a bargain. So it's like, and the more you do that, the more you end up with a wardrobe that, you know, you don't even wear. So people think they're saving money by buying stuff on sale. And I think you only save money that way if you're buying stuff that you actually wanted in the first place. Like if you find something you've always wanted in sale, then perfect. But if you're just buying stuff because I'm just gonna go to the TheRow sample sale and blow 10K, it's just you're wasting money. You're not even saving money like you think you are.
500 normal retail price, that at the sample sale was 3,375. And then the hauls came. It was primed for content. It was a load of people coming with their paper bags filled with TheRow wares, going through them, telling you obviously the deals they got and justifying why they bought them.
That's not very luxury of you, TheRow. Everyone holding their paper bags. Come on, you can do better than that. For how much money people were spending, and I know obviously it's still kind of run by a third party, but still, like they could have given them like some more luxurious bags than these like paper bags. Come on. Come on, TheRow, you can do better. I also think that these kind of things, and I think Cassie touched on this because there was a point I wanted to make, it's kind of destroying the mystique of what TheRow stands for, right? Because when you go on TikTok and all you're seeing are these videos of people holding these cardboard bags, these paper bags, it just doesn't look luxury. It doesn't seem luxury. I don't get an air of luxury. And to be honest, the reason why, in a kind of funny way, I kind of make fun of people that wear TheRow is only because I feel like the typical TheRow customer, not all, don't kill me, but the typical customer of TheRow is just someone that like maybe got into fashion like 2 or 3 years ago. Because most of the stuff that TheRow makes is just a dupe of Jil Sander or a dupe of Yohji Yamamoto or a dupe of Helmut Lang or a dupe of Phoebe Philo-era Céline. So if you went on Vinted or you went on The Real or you went on Grailed, you would actually find a lot of this stuff cheaper. So the only argument you can make is, oh, I just wanted a new version. Fair enough. But outside of that, like especially the TheRow customers that act like TheRow is really innovative, that's the one that kills me. And actually, I have something to talk about with this, right? Because I got into a bit of a Twitter fight about this. So Ryan Finn, for those of you that know Ryan Finn, someone who I'm a really big fan of, really respect their opinion on fashion. Someone on Twitter, so I think Ryan Finn made the point that TheRow is heavily inspired by Yohji Yamamoto. And when I read it, I was like, yeah, of course TheRow is heavily inspired by Yohji Yamamoto. Not only as the first designer I ever learned about was Yohji, so I know a lot about Yohji, and I see the inspiration in TheRow constantly, right? Not only do I see that, the Olsen twins have literally said themselves in an interview that they're inspired by Yohji. Let's actually play this interview for you guys.
Ingrained in us. We're really inspired by Yohji and Combe, but I guess it also goes back to, Chanel. I love Gaultier. Ingrained in us. We're really...
So this information is readily available. All of it is online, right? And then you have someone that was arguing, why would the TheRow wearer buy a Yamamoto? Two completely different aesthetics. And that shows how limited the typical customer of TheRow is in terms of like their knowledge of fashion or even like their understanding of fashion. Because if you're claiming to be a big fan of TheRow, then you have to be a fan of Yohji Yamamoto by default. Because so many of TheRow pieces are just Yohji Yamamoto 101 copies. So how could you possibly not like Yohji but like TheRow? The only way you could think that way is if you just don't have an understanding of fashion and you don't really know like what your favorite brand TheRow is inspired by. So that's why I make fun of TheRow customers, because they think like this. They're like these kind of people, right? So I obviously hopped into the conversation and was basically saying that, well, you're just wrong. Like Yohji literally inspires TheRow. And then I made this tweet where I essentially said, having fashion conversations on this app can be so limited at times because you are dealing with people that have such a limited frame of reference. How is this person really trying to argue that TheRow is not inspired by Yohji Yamamoto in any way? Once again, that's just me reiterating the point. And even we had someone who responded to my tweet, because the tweet actually got really big. It got like 368,000 views, which is crazy because I was just ranting on Twitter. But Digital Cowboy, who's someone I follow on socials, he has a really good knowledge of like Japanese brands especially. So he literally posted this image in response to my image where he was like, can you spot the difference? The first was made by Yohji Yamamoto and the second by TheRow. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? How TheRow literally creates one-of-one Yohji Yamamoto copies. So if you know anything about fashion, if you know anything about fashion history, and you look at the archives of brands like Yohji Yamamoto, Jil Sander, Phoebe Philo-era Céline, parts of Helmut Lang, you will start to see, and I mean, Phoebe Philo-era Céline was inspired by Helmut Lang, so, there's an alignment there, but you quickly start to see where all these clothes come from. So I just don't understand the obsession with the row when it's like, yeah, but you could just buy the cheaper version, the Yohji, the actual original version on the real. So that's why I really struggle to understand the row customers sometimes. But anyway, let's continue with the Cassie Thorpe video.
Each their own, you're allowed to buy whatever you want, whatever. But I did find it quite interesting that a lot of the justifications given by people doing these hauls was that these are timeless classic pieces that I will wear forever. Now, I have a beef with the term timeless anyway, like it's a recent beef, because I think that timeless means different things to different people. And there are, yes, a black cashmere sweater might be timeless to somebody, and to somebody else it's like, I actually never wear a black cashmere sweater. So here we are. We know that TheRow charges luxury prices anyway. These clothes are by no means cheap or approachably priced, or even on the sort of aspirational customer sort of level of luxury, right? And so even discounted, it still sounds like quite a lot. However, when it comes to these sample sales, side note, there's a lot of psychological back and forth that goes through this, because you're in there, it's a sodding time limit, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a great deal. It's a $13,500 coat that I'm getting for $3,300. $3,300 is still a hell of a lot of money, but it's not $13,000, right? And so your mind starts playing games with you, blah, 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 and maybe you end up using these things a lot and wearing them and whatever, and sometimes you're just like, why did
That's exactly the point I was making earlier. Like, Cassie Thorpe is 100% right about this. Like, you end up wasting money at sample sales if you're buying stuff that otherwise you wouldn't buy, because it just sits in your closet. So it's like, you see it as you save 2K because it's 3K reduced to 1K, but actually you've wasted 1K because you're not wearing it. So you've actually wasted 1K.
I went to a Balenciaga sample sale ages ago. I bought a dress from it, still not worn. Anyway, the sale was so successful that it actually closed a day early. They had raced through merchandise so quickly. Loads of brands do this, as I've said, especially in New York, it's everybody. Prada had their friends and family sample sale. This entire sort of sample sale businesses that every week they've got one. 260 sample sale, and others that I can't even...
So just to address this, Soap, you are correct to an extent. Depends on the item, in my opinion. The Row occasionally releases a jacket or pair of I think do enough differently to justify the purchase, but most of the items are copies you can buy cheaper. Yeah, so the problem with the Row, even when they make like loafers that maybe it's not a Yohji copy, it's still the case that so many brands make loafers, and so many brands make loafers that are, the construction is superior. Like in the UK, we have these like legacy storied footwear houses like John Lobb, Trickers, Gaggiano and Girling, like all these kind of, and they make footwear for women. The Row will never a day in their life make better quality footwear than these brands, right? And between all of, Churches, and between all of these companies, you're going to find loafers that look similar to the Row loafers. So then the question becomes, are you buying those loafers just because you like the design and you appreciate quality? Because if you appreciate quality, my argument would be you would go to one of those houses. Or are you just buying it because it's the Row and nothing else? That's the question I have to ask.
Think of under pressure here. I'm under pressure. Who else? René Cavill sample sale, Louboutin sample sale. There's so many, right? So why is this any different from any other brand holding a sample sale? This is what they do. Now, Amy Odell, who writes the Substack Back Row, had described the Row sample sale as the least quiet thing the Row has ever done. Quiet is the Row's middle name. It is absolutely wrapped in mystery. They famously do not allow phones during their runway shows, and that is anybody. That is the media who are there to cover it, no phones. I believe the first year they introduced this, one person, why do I want to say it was like Marie Claire or something, one of them posted it, and it was like a huge thing because you weren't allowed to have your phones in there, right? It's extremely controlled. They release the images they want to release on Vogue Runway. Nobody is there snapping a little, from the side shot of a shirt, flapping in the wind and posting it on their social media because they want to be able to control the perception of the brand, okay? They also, if you look at their Instagram, if you didn't know what the Row was and you looked at their Instagram...
I'm not sure if she's going to make this point, but I do think it's very fascinating considering the frenzy around this sample sale, I wonder what conversations are being had behind the scenes to control the next one. Because they want to be incognito and all this stuff, but there was absolutely nothing incognito about that sample sale. And I know they didn't like that. I know for a fact they didn't like that. So I wonder how they're going to do the next one.
You may not know that this is a clothing brand. They're sharing art and homewares and other such things, right? It's very sort of meticulously curated that it doesn't feel like every other luxury fashion brand, because they don't want to be every other luxury fashion brand. All right, keep that in mind with what we're talking about. Their branding in general, there is minimal, if any, branding on any of their pieces. If you look at their bags, it is the tiniest little foil stamp, right, that you have to sort of squint and get a magnifying glass out for in order to find it, okay? It's Where's Wally, but on a Margot bag. It's mysterious, it's if you know, you know, and it kind of provides this allure where we are at a stage in technology that we see the ins and outs of every brand all the time. A lot of the big luxury brands are posting daily. You see every aspect of the collections. You see the behind the scenes. You see campaigns, whatever. And we are so used to seeing so much of brands that sometimes in the complete opposite, which is the route that TheRow has gone down, has this sort of seduction about it, okay? And that obviously...
True. And I think a good part of, because when I think of TheRow, once again, I don't think the Olsen twins are like innovative. We've just talked about how many designers they essentially copy. However, what I think they're really good at, they're expert curators. I think they're amazing at branding. I think they're great at market positioning. I think they understand the psychology of luxury. The fact that the more exclusive you make something, the more people fight to get in. And that creates a sort of desirability that leads to dollar signs. So I think that's something that they're really good at. But in terms of design, I just don't think there's much there.
People in. As I mentioned, over the last few years, TheRow has really shot up when it comes to popularity on social media. Spurred on by the crowning of the Margot bag as being the next Birkin, through their sort of very similar limited stock strategies as Hermes. You've got celebrities wearing their pieces from Jennifer Lawrence and Kendall Jenner and Zoe Kravitz and so on and so forth. On top of that, you then have the hauls. You have the product reviews on social media. You have people unbox.
So let me just expose something quickly. Not necessarily about TheRow or whatever. I just want to show you guys something. Just because one of my good friends actually is like, he's a leather goods craftsman basically. And just through being around him, I've learned a lot about like what quality means in a handbag and what constitutes quality in a handbag on all those kind of things. And I just want to point some things out so you guys can look out for it. Because a lot of people say that like, this is such good quality, or TheRow, their bags are such good quality. And it's like, first of all, there's different kinds of like stainless steel that you can use in your hardware, right? So there's something called 904L stainless steel. 904L stainless steel is like a lot stronger than other versions of stainless steel. It has a higher content of chromium. It's more expensive to buy, obviously, way more expensive due to the higher alloy content. It doesn't tarnish as quickly as other versions of stainless steel. So these are like this is what like high quality bag. So a high quality bag should have hardware that is 904L stainless steel and it's coated in 24 karat gold. Now, let me know, come back to me and tell me how many of these luxury brands have that. Almost none. Like almost zero of the bags. And the reason why is because when you're a luxury brand and you have shareholders, it's like the consumers don't know about the kind of stainless steel that we're using. So instead of using 904L, let's use 316L stainless steel. That's a lot cheaper. And we can, considering the scale that these brands produce in, you know, they can save millions, tens of millions sometimes, just changing that hardware. And then instead of coating it with 24 karat gold, let's make it gold toned and all that sort of crap. So eventually it gets to a point where that's why when people are like, oh, Hermes is the height of quality, I'm just like, do you know what quality is? Like, do you actually know what quality is? Or are you just talking out of your ass because people have told you that Hermes is like the height of quality and like they use the best leathers and their hardware is the best? So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because like When people tell me that TheRow and Hermes make the best quality bags, it's just not true. It just isn't true. Like, I'm sorry.
Boxing their bags and spreading the word about the
Like, by the way, just to point this out, there are independent brands that talk about that their whole thing is about making quality garments and quality bags, and they do actually use things like 904L stainless steel and they coat it with 24 karat gold. But it's just not the major brands that are doing that. But there are brands that actually do that.
And that was previously extremely under wraps. The veil of this very elusive brand is being lifted off. And it's almost as though this like sample sale content has just fully gone and pulled it away. Like I said, they've been so intentional about sort of presenting themselves in a very particular way through what limited access they give us on their social media, that this sort of is starting to do the opposite to them. Okay? It's starting to feel a little bit exposed. A sample sale can dilute the perception of brands, okay? And, you know, it's similar to some brands don't have outlets because of the same thing. It's a similar strategy to certain brands will not be marked down in department stores, and that is like a thing drawn up into the contract. Certain brands don't even like to be physically put next to a sale sign, and that will be part of the contract. I found that out a few years ago and I thought that was really quite interesting because it dilutes this sort of allure of, oh, it can go on sale.
You can only do that when you have the leverage. So if you're a young brand or you're a brand that, like TheRow is hyped. So every store wants to stock TheRow because they know it's going to fly off the shelves. It's going to bring, you know, foot traffic into their stores, or it's going to bring clicks onto their website. And then people wanting to buy TheRow might buy other things in addition to TheRow. So there's a benefit to almost every store to stock TheRow because of how hyped it is. So because of that, TheRow has the leverage to tell, you know, stores, well, we're just not going to stock in your store unless you do this, or you show our brand next to this brand, or you show our brand close to here. But it's very few brands. Like, I just wanted to add that context because yes, it's in the contracts, but it's very few brands that can actually do that. All the other brands get fucked, like literally. Like we've been looking at the Essence situation and how much, you know, Essence is owing these brands and stuff. So yeah.
Oh, I can wait for it. But I can wait for the next sample sale. That sort of mentality. Vogue had done a bit of a write-up about the sample sale, and they got a spokesperson from the sample sale management firm, Privé, and they basically said, we kind of want it to just happen and disappear as quickly as possible. They don't necessarily like the noise that comes on social media after these sample sales, especially for a brand like TheRow. Why? Because it starts to feel slightly more accessible and even slightly more like mass market, right? If you look at the people who were shopping there, it's not just the Upper East Side mothers whose hefty contribution resulted in the building of a library for their child's private school. It is young girls who have the money and are dropping it at the TheRow sample sale as well, taken in by the hype and the so-called timelessness of the pieces. Listen, social media and hype around specifically an event can die down very quickly, okay? In a month, nobody's going to remember that, you know, there were all these sodding posts about the TheRow sample sale. And TheRow's reputation is most likely not going to be all that damaged. However, on October the 25th, Neelam Ahuja, who is a really incredible content creator. I deem her to be an expert on TheRow. This woman knows what she's talking about. And in her bio, it is self-described as TheRow collector. So she released a Substack post that I will have linked below. Please go ahead and read it. I'm by no means going to summarize everything in there. She also had a follow-up piece as well, entitled Open Letter to TheRow, We Need to Break Up. And this sort of summarized her experience of being a lover of the brand and how initially, you know, she started off by creating her content, and the brand seemingly, as it was, you know, was implied or said, you know, really loved that and sort of wined and dined her and, you know, was giving her all of these perks almost as like a thank you for being such a great, you know, unofficial brand ambassador in some ways. But it then started to get quite controlling, and they sort of wanted to some level, dictate what she said in her content when referring to them or to their pieces or whatever. In some cases, even belittling her and the impact of her content, which Neelam would have sent.
Do you know what's funny about this whole situation? And for people that don't know, Neelam is like a huge TheRow page. Well, was, it seems. Because it seems like she won't be buying TheRow anymore. But it's like the cycle of luxury fashion, right? So it's like the brands try to control the narrative, they try to pay everyone off, and then the audience can see through that. And so a new group of people come about that aren't controlled, and then the cycle continues. So what that was in luxury fashion was we had these fashion critics like Tim Blanks and Vanessa Friedman and Kathy Horan, all these like Susie Menkes that used to, just say it as it is, like Robin Gavin. They just used to say it as it is. And then the luxury fashion's way of controlling that was banning some of these journalists from the shows, paying off some of these journalists so that they can only give good reviews, threatening the magazines that they work at that they would pull advertising spend if they don't start giving positive reviews. So then what happened is you had people like me, people that created their own independent platform so they can say whatever they want. And now you have like the last Bottega Veneta show, I'm not sure how many of you know this, but some content creators got paid 10K to give a positive review. So now what we have is now these brands are trying to pay the commentators money under the table. So give us a good review, guys. So then that's how it's just a cycle. It's like a cycle, but brands don't understand that you can never really control it because the cycle always continues. Like no matter how hard you're trying, you can only say this and you can't say that. It doesn't work.
Thousands, if not tens, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars their way, because she is so well educated on the brand and is so very good at sort of breaking down, okay, why you should buy this size over this size and whatever else, that I have no doubt that a lot of her content would have inspired people to buy the brand or know more about the brand and therefore want to indulge in a purchase. She shared this publicly, and this obviously opened up a conversation about relationships between brands and customers, content creators, especially as she is a customer, an appreciator, a lover of the brand, a self-described collector. Where do these things...
So I understand why TheRow wanted to control what Neelam was saying, because I used to watch Neelam's content. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Neelam's content, but she only speaks positively about TheRow because she's a fan of TheRow. I don't even understand what there is to control. Like, okay, maybe she might buy one piece from TheRow and be like, oh, the quality isn't up to par. But why does that matter? For the most part, people follow Neelam because, she loves TheRow. So by extension, if you follow Neelam, it means that you want to learn more about TheRow and you want to get into TheRow more. So like, it's so dumb. Like these brands, I don't know who works for their PR and stuff, but it's always like really silly people that work in these departments that don't have a clue what they're doing. The thing with Neelam was she was genuinely posting because she loved the brand so much. They ruined that for her. The closer they got to her, she was the closest thing they had to brand evangelist. Facts. Like facts. Like literally nothing to add. 10 out of 10, no notes.
Kind of connect the hauls and this open letter. It's quite interesting because obviously all these hauls came out. TheRow cannot control the type of content or even in some cases the type of customer that went to these hauls and shared their experience and their purchases. And then you have somebody like Neelam who, in my opinion, her style seems so aligned to the brand. And they're even being very dismissive to somebody like her whose content is so like, it's very refined. It's very sort of elegant in the way that she, talks about things or presents things. But then you do something like this sample sale, which is so buzzworthy. These sorts of things don't seem to be all that aligned. Neelam also mentioned in that open letter that, TheRow likes to court certain people, including the Jenners, which I thought that this was really interesting as well. Recently, Mary-Kate was seen paparazzi'd outside of a very kind of like, we would call this in English bait, like a very kind of like popular, hyped restaurant in LA, with Kendall Jenner.
Oh, that's a faux pas. That's a faux pas.
Which again, doesn't seem very aligned with who they are, their brand, and the mystery. Like, they would never be at like a super buzzy restaurant with paparazzi outside. They hardly even do interviews, right? And then, you know, aligning themselves with somebody like Kendall Jenner, who, like, aside from nothing to do with the personality of the girl or whatever, never describe a Kardashian or a Jenner as quiet in any way. So again, that seems like a really strange sort of alignment. I'm going to use the term alignment again because apparently it's the only word I can think of. And I know that she's been wearing a lot of their stuff, and obviously I'm sure that
Someone in this Eddie Bravo, this is a really good comment, by the way. This is going into TMZ Gossip Girl territory. The Rose marketing is genius. Facts, because we're all talking about it. Although for me, because I've talked about all the brands they copy, they probably won't like some of the stuff I've had to say. But who cares? I don't buy TheRow. They can't control me. There's nothing they can do about it. But yeah, that was
this is a wonderful
comment.
deal for her. But how does that make sense? So you've kind of got this sort of like battling thing of this brand that is very quiet and has done very well by having this allure and mystery of it, especially when a lot of brands are doing the absolute opposite, with them doing these sort of like really quite buzzworthy things, being seen with certain celebrities, doing these sort of like sample sales. Listen, this is coming from somebody who, I am not a TheRow customer. Look at me. Look at what's behind. Somebody who, you know, like loves minimalism or whatever. However, I can really appreciate what they've managed to build. And I think that they've done it in an extremely smart way. And it's very, very impressive. So when they're starting to do these moves that kind of goes against what the whole brand is about, how does that make any sense? Now, you might be like, yeah, well, Hermes even does sample sales and they're like the top of the sodding food chain. I know.
But this is the problem, though, because we spoke about this before. We covered the story where TheRow had investors and got like really big investment, and when that happens, now the priority is profit, and you can't continue growing financially without extending your audience to new people. It's just not possible. So as a brand grows financially, you have to start doing things that have nothing to do with the ethos of the brand. We talk about this with Maison Margiela all the time, right? Margiela is supposed to be a brand that is like does things because of their philosophy of fashion. You know, he used the stitches because he wanted a way that it could signify the brand without it being loud. But now, modern Margiela, they're putting the stitches on people's mouths as piercings, and they're putting the number system as a print on t-shirts. Like, that's like so far away from the ethos of the brand. It's so far away, it's insane. But that's what you have to do if you want to keep growing and growing financially. So I think TheRow, as they continue to grow, it's going to be less and less kind of what the essence of the brand started with. I think that's only natural.
But Hermes doesn't do sample sales like that. Those are the most polite sample sales. It's not even a sample sale, it's an end of season, like, what, okay? Those are the most, like, controlled. It's extremely civilized. You have your time slot, you go. And yes, you know, the clothes are all over the place and it's not all that, you know, sort of luxurious inside because it's a sodding sale. But even then, right, it's very strictly invite only. To be honest with you, they're a brand on a completely different scale than TheRow. For a brand that is built on the allure and the mystery and the whisper, they are very close, I think, to kind of like hitting their peak or sort of like getting past it. I have no doubt that for the next couple of years, it's still going to be on the lists, top brands index. It's probably still going to have viral pieces and everything else. But if they continue doing these sorts of things, it makes them just like every other brand. And if there is one thing I will keep tooting my horn about, it's that the brands that are the most successful are the brands that know who they are and stick to their lane and have their blinders on and are not affected by what everybody else is sodding doing. So there we go. Those are my thoughts. Let me know.
Oh, do I agree with that? Because the brands that make the most money, so let me tell you guys the brands that make the most money in fashion. Chanel, Hermes, and Louis Vuitton. Those are the three brands that make the most money in fashion. Chanel has sold out a million ways. Louis Vuitton, same thing. Like, Louis Vuitton now has nothing to do with its heritage and like how it started and the essence of it. The only one that really still remains is Hermes. So I think for the most part, I think there are more success stories in luxury fashion of brands that go against their ethos in pursuit of higher profit margins and it working than the other way around. I think if you stick to your morals as a luxury brand, you actually just stay where you are and you never actually grow to like the multi-billion-dollar brands. You have to sell out to be a multi-billion-dollar brand, to be very honest. That's the only way. The only brand that hasn't is Hermes, and I do this because the quality of Hermes is not as good as people claim it is. And I know this because like I told you, one of my friends, he's like a leather craftsman. So it isn't as high as, it is, but I guess it's better than a lot of other luxury brands. That's why people are always ranting and raving about it. But Hermes is the only brand really you can say has like stuck to its ethos. Chanel definitely didn't, and Louis Vuitton, I don't even know where to start with that one, to be very honest. But yeah, that's the whole story about the Row. That's the whole shebang about the frenzy of the Row sample sale. Let me know if there are any closing thoughts. Let me go to the comments. I feel like I've missed quite a few of the comments. I think Chanel has been a lot more consistent than you are suggesting. Quality is garbage, but the values and image are consistent. Yeah, fair enough. That Margiela show with the mouthpiece was a nothing burger. It was just like, okay. I want to talk about those shoes you just bought. Are they a heritage label? I've never heard of them. Beautiful loafers. Okay, yeah, we can touch on this quickly. So the shoes I bought recently, they're by a brand called Grenson. So they've been making, and like I said, in the UK, we have like these sort of heritage footwear houses that kind of have been making shoes for like a really long time. So Grenson, I believe, has been making handmade footwear since 1866. And I got, let me see if I can find, I think they're classed as derbies. Let me see if I can find which ones they are. Not these ones. What are they? It's really hard to tell because I don't even know what the shoes are. Okay, these are the shoes I got. So they're called the Fairfax. But I just really like the shape, and of course the quality is sensational because it's one of these like historic houses. So like you can see, it's quality when they tell you the construction. It's Goodyear welted. They're telling you what kind of sole it is. So yeah, that's the shoe I bought essentially. For anyone that was wondering, yes, they run true to size. At least for me, they run true to size. So yeah, someone said you have money. No, I just don't buy a lot of clothes. So when I buy clothes, because I've been saving, I save up for stuff that I want. Like these shoes, I wanted them for maybe like 7 to 8 months before buying them. So it's just like, yeah, I don't have a lot of shoes, I don't have a lot of clothes, but I save up for stuff that I really want. That's all. I wouldn't describe myself as rich in any way. But anyway, that's the Row, that's the Grenson Fairfax. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.